You're good to go.
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. In case you weren't in this morning's session, I am Diego Delgado, and today I'm going to be teaching you a little bit about Adobe's video editing software, Premiere Pro. We went over a little bit of theory this morning, and if you want to go back and find that recording, I believe the REC will be posting that. But that's all right. We will be jumping straight into the software today now. So let me go ahead and share my screen. If you would like to be following along today, go ahead and actually start up Premiere Pro. It might take a second. It's a pretty intense software. It eats up a lot of your RAM. It can be intense on your GPU. But I mean, a lot of times it just takes a while to load, but you should be able to use it just fine. All right, so here we go, sharing my screen. So when you first start up Premiere Pro, you might get a bunch of screens, tutorials, telling you, hey, would you like to take a walk through this XYZ? You can close those down if you want. If you want to go through those, I mean, I can't stop you, but we're going to be jumping straight into a document today. So let's go ahead and do that. So this should be the screen you see. Of course, you might not have recent files if you've never worked on a Premiere Pro file before. But everything else should be about the same. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to click right here, this blue button in the top that says project. Click on that. Premiere Pro, as far as I know, all the most recent versions of it, it gives you a bunch of starter content. It's going to give you some sample files, and it's probably going to default to that folder the first time you try and make a file. You can navigate anywhere on your computer to find the content you want to import right out of the gate. We're actually not going to be importing any content right out of the gate today. We're going to start by just making an empty sequence, and then we're going to add stuff to that sequence. Okay, so right up at the top, you're going to see right here where it says project name. Go ahead and it's going to default to Untitled. Just call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it REC session. Caps lock was on. REC sessions. And then just click enter or click down here in the blue button that says create. And now you'll be greeted with this. Here's the thing about Premiere Pro. If you've worked on any of the other Adobe products, this might be quite a bit different. You might be used to having a big document in the middle with maybe some menus on the right and then a toolbar on the left. Premiere Pro is pretty different in that there's just so many different tabs that you can be working in. I believe that this is the default tab, or actually, no, I should say the default workspace. Let me go to the default workspace because that's probably what you're going to be getting if you're opening it up for the first time. Or no, you'll probably be getting the learning workspace. If your project looks like this, that's okay. We'll be going through how to get things set up the way that we want it. So the workspace that I like to start out in a lot of the time is the Essentials workspace. So to do that, you're going to go up to the top over here where it says no. You're going to go to where it says workspaces, and then you're going to hover over that to open up all these panels. So basically what this is these are different combinations of tools and windows and menus and panels and everything like that Adobe has said, hey, if you're working on this specific thing, you're probably going to want these tools, and they're labeled as such. If you're assembling a video project, you're probably going to use the assembly workspace. If you're mostly working on the audio for your clip, you're going to be using the audio workspace, and so on. I bounce around between quite a few of them. I use editing quite a lot. I use audio, of course, when I'm doing audio. Essentials is just pretty easy to navigate. And while I said I mostly use Essentials, we're going to go into editing for the first time around. So if you're following along, go ahead and click on editing and you should have this. So from here, we have a bunch of empty containers, basically. And we don't want that. We actually want a timeline. So we're going to go over here to where it says import media to start. We're going to right click on that. We're going to find where it says new item, and we're going to click on sequence. Now you can think of a sequence as kind of a holder for everything that you put into your video file or into your Premiere Pro project. It's going to hold your audio. It's going to hold your images. It's going to hold your video and your text and your shapes and everything you could put into a Premiere Pro file. This is the container for all that stuff. So there's a bunch of presets, and there's plenty of great presets that you could use. We're going to actually go into right here where it says settings, the settings tab, and you're going to see you're going to have a bunch of different options: DSLR, time base, frame size, a bunch of stuff. We're only going to change a couple of these for the sake of simplicity. For editing mode, I'm going to open it up and I'm going to click on custom. I'm going to make my time base 29.9 frames per second. If it's already that, then go ahead and just leave it. I'm going to make sure my frame size is 1920 horizontal by 1080 vertical. And if you were in this morning session, you'll know that that is a 16:9 aspect ratio. We're going to make sure that our pixel aspect ratio is square pixels. And we're pretty much going to leave everything else whatever it defaults to.
Diego, can you repeat that? And it's kind of hard to see it because it's because of the way it's zoomed.
Yeah, absolutely. What part?
Can you just go through the settings again?
Yes. So starting from the very top, the part that says editing mode, make sure that that's set to custom. In the drop-down menu, it should be the topmost option. That it might be a little bit hidden because if you're like on one of these lower ones, you might not realize that you can scroll up, but it should be the topmost option, custom. And then beneath that, you should have the drop down for time base. Time base is going to be 29.97 frames per second. If it's already that, then you can go ahead and just leave it. So that was the first block of settings. Moving on to the video block of settings, we're going to make our frame size 1920 1920 by 1080 1080. And in case you want to double check to make sure that that aspect ratio is correct, then over here, it should say 16:9. Make sure that the pixel aspect ratio is square pixels, open parenthesis, 1.0, close parenthesis. And everything else should be left alone.
Got it. Thanks.
Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay. And just a reminder, if at any point you need me to slow down, repeat something, go into more depth on something, I know that Zoom will occasionally have a lag. So I'll say something and I'll demonstrate it, but the video won't catch up until a couple seconds later. So yeah, if at any point you need me to go into more detail or recover something, please feel free to chime in. Okay. So from there, we're only going to change one more thing before we click OK. And we're going to change the name of the sequence. So this is somewhere where I see people get tripped up sometimes. There is a project name, and then there's also a sequence name. And then within your sequence, there's video names. The project is, if you can think of it like nesting dolls, right? The project is the biggest nesting doll. And then inside the project, you have a sequence, and that's one smaller. And then inside the sequence, you have your content, and that's your videos and things like that. That's one smaller. But they're all wrapped up in your project. So we're going to be naming the sequence, which is the second to biggest wrapper, basically. And I'm just going to change this sequence name to sequence 1. Was it already that? Might have already been that by default. But yeah, you can go ahead and just name it whatever you want. It doesn't really matter, just as long as you make it memorable. It needs to work for you, basically. Okay, so then we're going to click OK, and boom, now we have a timeline. What does that mean? This big section over here on the bottom right, that's your timeline. That's what we call the timeline. And a couple things for navigating the timeline. You can scroll to move left and right in your timeline, and you might notice that you can't move a whole lot immediately in your timeline. And that's probably because of this thing right here. You should see this little slider basically on the bottom of your timeline. And the slider has open circles on both sides. And to basically zoom in or out of your timeline, you're going to click one of those circles and you're going to drag it, and it will either zoom in or it will zoom out. You'll notice that if I drag this little circle to the left, the time scale on the top is basically it's getting bigger. It's getting larger. When it's all the way on this side, you'll see that I can see all the way up to 8 minutes and 32 seconds. But maybe I'm not working with enormous long clips like that. Maybe I'm working with things more like 12 seconds long at a time. So I'm going to click on that, drag it over, and make it just a little bit more workable for the time frame we're working in, probably maxing out around 30 seconds. So that's a really basic way. That's a really basic form of navigating the timeline. And you can scroll to move along your timeline. And the scrolling, of course, works a little bit better when you're in this smaller, local, zoomed in view versus if you're looking at a massive section of your timeline. Okay, so cool. That's a timeline. That's great, but it's empty. So let's actually put something in it. So over here in the sequence section, we're going to actually add some content. So go to over here where we originally added our sequence, right click in that area, click on new item, and actually, no, I'm not going to do it like that. I'm going to do it differently. Yeah, instead of that, click on right here where it says media browser. It's just a little bit more intuitive, I think. Under favorites, you should have a folder that just says footage by default. Double click on that. And this is where Adobe should have provided starter content. If there's not starter content, I mean, feel free to do this with any footage you have. But I'm going to be using starter content because it should be provided for everyone by default. And you'll see that it shows how long it is. So right here, this is a very short clip. I believe that means it's 8 frames long. And this clip, for example, is 2 seconds and then 8 more frames long. And you'll notice that in Premiere Pro, the time is in hours, minutes, and seconds. And then I actually don't even remember what the largest increment of time is. But over here, under where it says sequence 1, the furthest right 00, that's going to refer to seconds. Then move over 1 to the left. Oh no, I'm so sorry. The furthest right is frames. Move 1 to the left, that's seconds, and then minutes, and then hours. And then depending on what you have your document set up as, I think you can actually have even more big time increments. But okay, we're just going to be working with frames, seconds, minutes, and hours for now. So, okay, I want a slightly longer video clip to show you some of the tools that we're going to be using. So let's pick this one because it's 12 seconds long. That's relatively long comparatively. So in case you didn't see which one if you get a little mismatch like this, that's okay. You can keep the existing settings. I'll tell you why that happened in a second. This is just for example though. So go ahead and click it, drag it in, and you'll see that it's now in the timeline. I see that someone unmuted. Is there a question?
What was the name of the clip?
It is it's, I mean, it's a bunch of numbers. It's Adobe stock underscore 1166400.
One more time, please.
Actually, this is a good this is a good opportunity to show you guys the different views that you can find in this media browser. Over here, down here, you should see that you can click on this little icon that says thumbnail view, or you can click on this one right here that says list view. List view can be very helpful for finding something based off of its name instead of what it looks like necessarily. So this will list all of your videos just like a file, and you won't get all the fancy stuff of telling you what it looks like or how long it is. But in this case, it's pretty useful because I need to literally read off a name. So it is Adobe stock underscore 116640009.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
If you can't find it by any chance, and if you're following along, go ahead and just pick any other slightly longer video, because I think there's several that are longer than 10 seconds. Yeah, there's another one. There's another one. There's another one. Yeah, just or even this one, it's 6 seconds. Stars TL is 6 seconds. Any of them will work. I'm just going to show you a couple of the things that are important with this. So this is a great opportunity to show you something. You'll see that when I dragged it into the timeline, there's all this black space around my video, which we of course don't want. I see this way too often, honestly. It's someone is using an editing software, and what essentially has happened is they've set up their document to be much larger than the videos they're working with. So here, this video is probably like standard definition. It's probably not even high definition, potentially. And so since it's a much smaller video, it's going to be small in our window because we set up our document to be, you know, a proper high definition video. And so we have all this space around it because this is literally a smaller video than we are set up to work with. Was there another question? Yes.
Yeah, when I drug it over, it gave me a warning that says clip mismatch warning. The clip does not match the sequence's settings. Change sequence to match the clip settings, question mark.
Okay.
And it gives me the options to either change the sequence settings or keep the existing settings.
Keep the existing settings, and that's what I'm going over right now about what that means and what it what it's going to mean for you in your editing process. So go ahead and keep the existing settings, and once you do that, you should get, like I'm talking about, this big black area around your footage.
Yes.
And you don't want that. That's a bad thing, but I'm showing you it because it's important to know how to navigate it. So that warning that he mentioned, that is, like I was saying, that's Adobe saying, hey, you're trying to import this clip, right? And this clip is way smaller than the document that you originally set up. You set up this document to be 1920 by 1080, and this video you're importing is just way smaller than that. Are you sure you want to do that? And it'll probably also give you that warning if the video is not the frame rate that you set up your document to be. But that's the thing. A lot of times when you have this kind of very constructive editing process, you're using lots of videos, potentially from lots of different sources, from different people, different devices, different recordings. You're going to have differences in aspect ratio. You're going to have differences in frame rate. You're going to have all kinds of differences. And you're just going to need to learn how to navigate that. But that is what I'm going to show you right now. So you have this video in the middle of your document. You've got a lot of black space, and you don't want that. So click on the video in your timeline. And then once it's selected, right click on it. And in this big pop-up that shows up, search for, you'll have two options: set to frame size and scale to frame size. Now let's try both of them to see what happens. Scale to frame size will stretch your video so that it fills the frame. Okay. Top to bottom, your frame is full of your video. Now, this might not be ideal if you're working with an especially small video, because then things will start to look grainy, things will start to look pixelated. You're gonna run into those problems. So just be aware of that. But I want you to know that that was an option. That'll automatically fill the frame with the footage that you have. So I'm going to click Control Z. It's Command Z on Mac, and all that does is it undoes whatever the most recent action was. And so now you should have just your little video in the middle of your frame again. So now we're going to try that other option. Right click, and then click on Set to Frame Size instead. Now, this is more noticeable when you're using a video that is a different aspect ratio. And you might think, well, what's the difference? It looks like it did the exact same thing. Well, with the first option, it stretches your video to fill the frame. And with the second option, what it does is it stretches the video out until one side hits the border of your frame. So if you're working with a video that is maybe shorter or less big vertically, has a different aspect ratio than 1920 by 1080, or a different aspect ratio than what we're working with, then you're going to hit one side, one border, before you hit the other border. So that's the difference between the two. I hope that makes sense. If you need me to try and explain that again, I can. But yeah, it's basically the first option stretches it until the entire screen is filled up. The second option stretches it just until one side hits the border. Sounds good? Okay. So now I'm just going to completely remove this clip. I don't want this clip anymore because I want to work with a clip that doesn't say Adobe stock right in the middle. So I'm going to click on that, and you can click backspace and it's gone. So now I'm going to go to, let's see here, and I'll read out the title of whatever clip I pick so that you guys, if you're following along, we can all be working with the same footage. Fog, capital T, L. That is the next video clip that we're going to be working with. You might get that warning again. Keep existing settings. And then we're going to actually practice what we did a second ago. Click on it. Right click on it.
Diego?
Yes.
How did you get rid of the clip that you just had a few minutes ago?
All right. So let's say nothing's selected. You're going to click on the clip you want to get rid of. And then you should be able to just click backspace. And that should get rid of it. If that doesn't work, I think there is another way to get rid of it. You should be able to click on cut. If you, hold on, I'm sorry, I did that too quickly. So click on it, right click on it, and then all the way at the top, you should see cut in the menu that pops up. And that should be 2 ways to get rid of footage that's in your timeline. Backspace, you should work though. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And that's the thing about these Adobe products a lot of the time, is there's 5 ways to basically accomplish the same exact thing. I mean, if you're working with an expanded keyboard, I think you should be able to also click the delete key, not the backspace key, the delete key, or DEL, and it should accomplish the same exact thing. But yeah, there's always more than one way to solve a problem or to accomplish something in these projects a lot of the time. Okay, so if you have fog, capital T, capital L in your timeline, we are going to make it so that it fits the size of our window. So click on it and then right click on it. And then we're going to set to frame size. And you'll see what I mean about how now it's a little bit not not great quality because you zoomed in and it's not an enormous video. But I mean, this is just the starter content, the starter videos that Adobe gives you. So it's not going to be phenomenal, but but it'll work for our purposes. I'm going to make my timeline a little bit more zoomed out, maybe so that my first clip takes up about half of my timeline. Yeah, I'm just going to get it a little bit. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to work on we're going to basically work on breaking down this timeline. I keep talking about this timeline. Well, what does that mean? Well, you'll see at the very top, you have a time scale, and that scale is in same as over here. It's in frames, then seconds, then minutes, then hours. So this clip is a little bit over 14 seconds long. Or actually, if we go over here, we can see that it's 14 seconds long and then 13 frames after that. And when I clicked and dragged it in, it brought this thing with it. There's this second blue bar underneath this top bar. And what that is the audio that is associated with this clip. Now, a lot of times by default, a video will have an audio channel associated with it, even if that audio channel doesn't actually have any noise in it. And that's the case here. If you were to listen through this clip, there doesn't really appear to be any actual noise happening. That's fine. A lot of times you're going to want to fill your videos with voiceover or background music or something like that anyway. But I just don't even want to mess around with the audio at all. So in that case, I'm going to click on it. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to click right here where it says unlink. It should be just beneath this this check mark option that says enable. We're going to click unlink. And when we do that, now we are free to move our video independently of our audio. I'm going to click Control Z to put that back into position. And then I'm going to click on the audio channel and I'm just going to click backspace, get rid of it entirely. No audio associated with that video now. Okay, so now we have just an audio file or just a video file in our timeline. Great. And we know what the timeline is. We know that this is a video channel and this is an audio channel. And by default, a Premiere Pro project will have 3 video channels and 3 audio channels. You can always add more. You can delete channels, stuff like that. But most of the time, you're going to be good with 3 video channels and 3 audio channels, or I've found that anyway, especially for simple edits. So the next thing we're going to talk about is this thing that it has a bunch of different names depending on the background of basically whoever you're talking to. Some people call it just a marker. Some people call it the playhead. People call it different things. But whatever you call it, it's talking about this line that goes vertically down your timeline. And that basically says where in the video you are currently looking at in this preview up here. And you can click it, and you can drag it, and you'll see right here, it'll show the playhead position. So it says, okay, currently the playhead is at 6 seconds and then 28 frames after 6 seconds. And you can click it, drag it around. You can find exactly where you want. I'm going to tell you 2 keyboard shortcuts. Now, I don't use many keyboard shortcuts when it comes to video editing, but there's 2 that are really useful. So I'm going to position my playhead right about in the middle. Now, if you just click Q on your keyboard, it will delete everything to the left of the playhead and then shift your video clip all the way as far left before running into other content or the beginning of your project. I'm going to click Control Z to undo that. I'm going to put my playhead back in the middle, and then I'm going to click W. W does the same exact thing, but it deletes all the video to the right of the playhead. I'm going to click Control Z again to undo that. And those are pretty much the only 2 keyboard shortcuts that I want to leave with you. They can be useful for making really quick edits. However, I do not encourage you to cut your video too much of the time, and I'll tell you why now. I'm going to click on my video, and then there's basically two ways to accomplish the same thing, but there is a difference between what's actually happening underneath the hood, or you know, on a more minute level, when you're trying to basically make a clip shorter. You can do, like we said, the Q and the W, and it'll cut at the playhead to the left or the right. Or if you come over here, there's a little icon that looks like a razor blade. It's called the razor tool, and the keyboard shortcut to access it is C, but I'm just going to click on it. If you come over to your timeline now and you go over to a clip, you can cut your clip. And if you hover over the playhead, you can cut at the playhead. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to cut at the playhead, and boom. Now I didn't delete any content, but now my footage is chopped up into two separate pieces. And I can mess with them independently. I'm going to click on this one on the right, and I'm going to drag it. Oops. Sorry, my computer lagged there for a second. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to drag it to the right. And now there's this big gap between my videos. So if I try and play this video, and you can click this play button right here to basically preview what playing your video will look like, you'll see that I just have blank space now. I just have a black screen in this area. And that's because I split my video and then I dragged it to the right. And now there's just nothing filling this area right here. If you go back and you have your selection tool, make sure it's the little arrow. This is probably going to be the main little tool that you're using most of the time. Click on that. Click on the blank space. You can actually select blank space. Click this space between these two videos. You can click delete, and it'll immediately bring your videos together. It'll delete the blank space and bring your videos together. Now I'm going to click Control Z several times to undo that original cut that I made. And I have a whole clip again. And I just want to, before I move on any further, I want to check in, make sure that so far everyone's following along, everyone's comfortable with Q, W, clicking and dragging videos, unlinking audio, and using the razor tool.
Oh, I had a quick question, Diego.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you use the scale and set, as you explain the difference between it stretching, scaling, and then stretching till one side meets, is there a rule of thumb as to whether it crops? Does one of those tend to crop your image?
Yes, they're actually excellent question. Yes, there is one will technically cut out content, because if you use the scale to frame size, you will technically lose bits of your image, because it's stretching until both sides fill the workspace. It's stretching your video until everything is inside your workspace. So that might mean that in order to scale uniformly, maybe your top and bottom meets the border, but the left and right haven't. So you need to keep scaling to get those left and right to reach the border. And in order to do that, you're going to lose top and bottom. So yes, to answer your question, setting to the frame size, you will not lose any of your image, but you might get black bars on either the top and bottom, or left and right. Scale to frame size, you will lose parts of your image. I hope that answers your question.
Sure does. I've noticed the difference. As you mentioned, right, the phones produce amazing video quality now, but I've noticed the difference between my DSLR, the aspect ratios, right, between the phone and the DSLR are wildly different. So that's one thing. When you go to combine those footages, you always have to consider it, and that's interesting. That does it allow you to choose how that goes? Could you kind of like choose to lop off one bit and fill the frame to make them match, for your final product?
There actually is more ways that you can control the scaling and stuff like that. And I'll try and get to that in a second when we start talking about keyframing.
Awesome.
But yes, I'll try and I'll talk about that in like just a couple minutes. So those are the basic controls for working in your timeline. You'll see that there's a bunch of other tools. There's a couple that honestly they're just not all that useful. This hand tool, it accomplishes the same exact thing as scrolling. You click and drag and you can move along your timeline, or you could just scroll. And it accomplishes the same exact thing. So hand tool isn't all that useful. And we'll cover a couple of these in just a second. Honestly, let's just cover what Mr. Ortega mentioned just now. Oh, and if you want to be more precise with your playhead, you can actually move frame by frame. And to do that, you're going to click in your playhead, make sure that you have your playhead active. And then you can use your arrow keys. If you move to the left with your arrow keys, you'll go one frame at a time to the left. And if you move your right arrow key, you'll go one frame at a time to the right. And that can just be really useful when you're trying to get your videos to perfectly meet up with each other. You don't have any empty space, no empty frames between putting two clips together. So let's talk real quick about keyframes. So I'm going to drag in stars.tl, and I'm just going to put it on the same channel, the same video channel, same audio channel as our first video. That's stars, capital T, capital L. It should be about 6 seconds long. I'm going to unlink, and I'm going to get rid of this audio the way that we did in the first one. And now you'll see that once again, our video is small in the frame, but we're going to do something a little bit different this time. Instead of clicking on it and filling it in the frame and stuff like that, we're going to go to the very beginning of our clip, which means the very next frame after our last clip ends and the first frame that this clip begins. We're going to go to that frame. We're going to select our clip. And then we're going to go to over here where it says effects controls. And then we're going to go to motion, drop the little drop down where it says motion. You should see a little stopwatch that says position. You should see a little stopwatch that says scale, rotation, anchor point, anti-flicker, filter, and so on. And this is where we're going to start talking about something called keyframing. And we'll go into a lot more depth of keyframing in the session next month on After Effects, because we're just going to be doing a ton of keyframe work. Well, maybe not a ton, but more than we're going to do here. So you'll have a lot more control about how your frame fits in the window if you just go in here and you manually do it. And so what you're going to do is you're going to go over here where it says motion. You're going to find where it says scale. You're going to click on this little stopwatch, and it should be blue now. And then we are going to see right here where it says 100. You can either click on that and enter a number, or what I like to do is I just like to click on the number and then drag. If you drag to the right, your image will get bigger. If you drag to your left, the image will get smaller. And so let's say we wanted the entire video to be in the frame, but let's say for some reason we only wanted the bottom left portion in the frame, and we really didn't care too much about the top right. We're going to zoom in a little bit further. Let's call it about 350, 360. And now we want the bottom left of the frame. So now we're going to go to position. We're going to drop a keyframe on there. And then we're going to take this first number. We're going to click it and we're going to drag it to the right. And that's going to move our video to the left. And you'll see where the border pops up. And we want to make sure that the border is right in line so that we're not going into any blank space. And then on the other number, we're going to click and we're going to drag that to the left, and that's going to move our video down. And again, we're going to run into the border, make sure that we're not getting any black space, and boom. Now we are only looking at the bottom left of our video, and it's filling our entire frame. So that's kind of how you control what gets cut off and what doesn't, if anything gets cut off. If something's going to get cut off, you want to know what's going to get cut off and stuff like that. I hope that that answers your question, Mr. Ortega. There's a couple other things we can do in the effects panel that kind of have to do with that, and it has to do with keyframing and stuff like that. Honestly, just while we're here, let's talk about some of these other things you can affect with keyframes. In this same tab, motion tab, you can rotate. Drop a keyframe for rotation, click and drag number, boom. Now our video is rotating. I'm gonna Control Z to undo that rotation just to make sure it's perfectly 0. And I'm actually gonna Control Z one more time so there's not even a rotation keyframe there anymore. And then these other things I don't really work with too much. Let's talk about opacity. Yeah, why not? This is actually where things start to get interesting with keyframing. Is you might think, oh, cool. So the video is manipulated and now it's zoomed in and you're looking at one little spot because you changed the size and the position, which is great. But with keyframing, you can actually make those things change over time. So I'm going to drop a keyframe over here for opacity. I'm going to drop a keyframe and I'm going to set the opacity to 0. And you'll see that when I set the opacity to 0, the video disappears. It's just gone. That's what it means to have an opacity of 0. It's transparent, basically. The video is there, but it's 100% see-through. So you're just seeing a black screen. So now what I'm going to do is in my timeline, the beginning of this video is 14 seconds and then 16 frames. I'm just going to go 2 seconds into the future. And I can do that very precisely by clicking on those blue numbers, clicking on the seconds portion, deleting the 4 and putting a 6 in instead. Now I will go exactly 2 seconds into the future in my timeline. And now I'm going to go to opacity. And instead of clicking on the little stopwatch, I'm going to come over here to where there's a little circle. I'm going to add an additional keyframe. That's what that's going to do. It's going to add another keyframe. And then I'm going to click and drag my value to 100. And so now if I go back to the beginning of my video, you'll see it starts out with an opacity of 0. But as it goes along, my opacity, and you'll see over here, the little percentage is increasing. And it's just going to create a steady increase in opacity over time until we reach 100. And it's going to stay 100. And that's how you can have a real simple fade from black effect. And you'll notice that a lot of times, like effects and stuff like that you can perform on these videos, it's really just adjusting keyframes and making sure you get your timing and stuff like that down. That you can do some really neat stuff, and it's not too complicated. And then you can of course do the exact same, but the opposite. You can start with an opacity of 100, and then at the end of your video, you can have an opacity of 0, and you can have a fade to black instead of a fade from black.
That's a cool transition.
Yeah, it's I've noticed in the design trends in terms of video, most recently, transitions have gotten a lot more straightforward. Like back in the day of 2008 and the wonderful days of iMovie and stuff like that, there were all kinds of wonderful, wacky transitions that videos would have a lot of the time. Pixelations and dissolves and ripple effects and stuff like that. But it seems like the current trend is just straightforward, either a hard cut or just a simple fade. I mean, we could do something, and actually, let's do that. Let me show you one more effect that you can do. I'm going to get rid of all my keyframes, all of them. And I'm just going to have I'm just going to have a video right in the middle of the screen again. And this time, I'm just going to set it to the frame size. I'm not going to do it manually. But I'm going to go to the beginning of my video the same way that I did before, using my arrow keys to be really precise, go frame by frame. And I am going to set my position. I'm going to set my position to you know what, let's just drag until your video is basically out of the frame, 100%, whatever that may be. And then we're going to go 2 seconds in the future, same exact way that we did it earlier. Go to 16 seconds and then 16 frames. And then we're going to, I'm sorry. This is something that you're going to notice happens. I made that adjustment, but I didn't drop a keyframe. And so if you make an adjustment and you don't drop a keyframe, it's just saying, oh, that's how you want your video to be all the time, and you never want it to change. Remember to drop a keyframe if you plan on making changes. Otherwise, you won't be able to edit it at all later. So moving back, I'm going to drop a keyframe. Then I'm going to drag my video off frame all the way to the right. And then I'm going to go 2 seconds in the future, 16 seconds and 16 frames. And then I'm going to drag this. Whoops. Nope. Again, drop a keyframe and then drag it in to frame. And by doing that, you can create kind of a nice sweeping transition. And I mean, this is very basic. This is very simple. It might even be a little bit dated, this kind of transition. But it's something you can do. And we'll be talking a little bit more about movement in keyframing and animation and stuff like that in the After Effects tutorial. Because After Effects is where we actually make a lot of motion graphics and stuff like that for videos. If Premiere is where we kind of assemble and edit the big stuff, After Effects is where we kind of get into the little things that really make videos pop. Motion graphics, animated logos, things like that. Green screens, effects, stuff like that. So yeah, those are two neat little transitions that you can kind of make pretty simply just using keyframes. Fade to black or slide into frame. All right, so a couple more things that I want to cover. I'm going to go back to when this video didn't have any keyframes, but it is popped into frame. And just real quick, because I don't think I covered it yet. If Control Z is to undo, Control Shift Z is to redo. And so if you go too far, like I went too far just then, and my video was back to this state, but I wanted to do that stretching effect again. Control Shift Z redoes it. All right, so we've got a little bit more time, and I'm gonna cover some more stuff. But before I move on, are there any questions? Does everyone feel comfortable with the things we've talked about so far?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Cool. All right, then let's talk about the shape tool. That's something that I find myself using kind of a bit, just to, if I don't want to go into After Effects, if I don't want to get into like the nitty-gritty of video editing, I can do a lot of it just in Premiere if I want to. And one of the ways you can spruce up a video is by adding shapes. It's not quite motion graphics like you get in After Effects, but you know, it can make things a little bit nicer. So I'm going to click this rectangle tool, and if you click and hold, you'll get the ellipse tool and the polygon tool. They're for making shapes. You can make rectangles, ellipses, or polygons. I'm just going to make a rectangle. And if I go into my main viewport and I click and drag, I can make a shape. I'm just going to make a little shape in the bottom-ish area of this video. And you'll see that it pops up in our timeline. It'll pop up to the right of our play, wherever it may be. And it by default just has a certain amount of time associated with it. And oh my gosh, I haven't even covered this yet. This is one of the main features of Adobe Premiere Pro. So you'll see that if I kind of hover over the end of a clip, and this isn't true for all clips, but it's true for some clips, you can click and drag, and it'll lengthen how long that clip is on screen, basically. And there's a little distinction to be made. Let me unselect everything. it is kind of hard to see this, but if you look at these videos right here, these videos on channel 1, on V1, these blue ones, not the pink one, the blue one. If you look at those, if you look at the top right corner of those videos, you'll see a little gray triangle. And what that means basically is that that video is as long as it can be. You can't elongate it, because if you were to want to make it longer, you'd have to slow down the video. There is not more video to be had. That is the end of the video. Whereas something like a graphic, you don't see those little corners. You don't see those little gray corners, because that graphic can be as long as you want it to be. It's not confined by how long the video is, because you can just, it's something you're 100% making. It's completely abstract. It doesn't come from previously recorded footage. So you can make this as long as you want. A way to tell if you can do that or not is if it has that little gray corner. And you'll occasionally see that you have that little gray corner on one side, but not on the other. And what that means is you can make it longer in this direction. If it doesn't have a corner, you can make it longer in that direction, basically. So yeah, I'm going to make these the same length. And then I'm going to click on my graphic. I'm going to go to the effects controls. Click on it right here where it says shape. I'm going to change the fill to just white. Yeah, just white. I'm going to click OK. Now it's just a white square. And honestly, everything else is fine. This is just for demonstration purposes. Now I'm going to click on the type tool. Click on the type tool. Make sure you're at frame 1, or frame 00000 rather. And then I'm going to click right above my my shape. And it's not going to be perfect, but it'll be close. Now I can type in this little red box. Click in that little red box and type whatever you want. I'm just going to type words, and it's defaulting to white. So I'm going to make sure I highlight it. And I'm going to change the fill to black. Whoops. Dang. I'm sorry. I accidentally selected my my shape. I didn't mean to do that. So okay, so I see what happened there. It's automatically trying to make the graphic and the text the same thing, and that's probably because I had the graphic selected. Make sure nothing is selected. Make sure nothing is selected at all. Click on the type tool. Try that one more time. I'm gonna actually click off of the shape entirely. There we go. Now it's filling on a different channel entirely. Now I can go in here and click and type words. Highlight those letters. Go to your graphics controls. Change the fill. I'm just gonna change it to black so it's nice and readable on that white. And then go to position and put it right in the middle of your white box. Now you have kind of something like a title. And from this same panel, if you have your text selected, you can go to text and you can change a bunch of things. You can change things that you would find pretty typical in every word editing software. You can change the spacing, you can change the alignment, you can change the font, and you can change the size, and you can change the stroke and the fill. And if you want a shadow, you can do that. This is where you're going to find all of your settings for text in the text section of graphics with your text selected. And again, if you click and hold on your type tool, you'll get access to the vertical type tool. It's the same exact thing as the regular type tool, except you type vertically, up and down instead of left and right. Okay, so there's one last thing I wanted to show. We've talked about keyframing. We've talked about cutting clips, and we've talked about moving clips. And there's one more tool I want to show you. Then we're going to talk a little bit about audio. I'm going to click on this tool right here, which is the track select forward tool. And what this basically does is it selects an entire track and you can move it. You can select everything and move it all at once. Okay. Now that's really useful because if you were to try and just move things manually with the select tool, you would try and move this, but it would just move one thing. So I guess the alternative to that is to highlight over everything. And you can highlight things by clicking and dragging, and you'll get this little box. And you can highlight a bunch of things. Click and drag, and you can move everything, which works. It's fine. Or you can just use this tool. Click and drag. It does the same exact thing. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about audio. If you want to save this file and do a little bit more experimenting later, you can. I'm just gonna get rid of it because I don't need it anymore. I'm going to go to open project. You don't have to do this because this is a file that I have created. It's on my device. You don't have access to it because it's just for an example. Sound example. Okay, so that's how you open previous files, actually, things that we've already worked on. Go to File, Open Project, and you can navigate to it on your computer. Or if you've found it pretty recently, if you worked on it pretty recently, you can go to Open Recent and you'll have access to several of the files you've worked on most recently. So this is just an audio file. Now, I made this audio file it's just in Adobe Premiere. It wasn't an audio file that I brought in, took from somewhere else. It's 100% recorded in Premiere, all that jazz. So what I'm going to do is, and this hopefully doesn't break my audio from Zoom, but what I'm going to do is this little microphone here on the audio channel. I'm going to click on that and you'll see it's going to give me a little bit of a countdown and then it's going to start recording. Let's try that. 3, 2. This is a test. Oh, I'm sorry. I should have muted this first. Let me mute that. Delete that. This is a test. Okay. So now I have this nice little audio right here. However, if I zoom in on it, let me, oh, and that's actually another thing that's useful to know. If you come over here to the left side of your documents, you'll see that you'll get this little double-sided arrow. If you click and drag, and let me actually click and drag from here too, you'll be able to see more of any one channel that you're trying to look at. So if we look at this channel right here, we'll see that it's a straight line and then we've got spikes coming up, which is indicative of our volume and our audio and stuff like that, right? Here's the problem. If you want to hear audio in both sides of your speakers or both sides of your headphones, you need those spikes to be exactly the same on both sides, top and bottom, which it's not currently doing. And just a really simple fix for that is you right click on it and you go to audio channels. And then you'll see right here, it's labeled as left and right. Instead of it being labeled as left and right, we're just going to make it left on both sides. That can be a little bit confusing because it's like left and right and right and left and right. And it's very confusing. Just all you need to know is that it's probably going to, by default, record all of your audio to the left channel. And you just want to say, okay, take my left channel and just play it in both speakers. And that's what it'll do. So if I click OK, now I have a left channel and a right channel. And it'll just be the same exact audio in both headphones. And so that's how you fix mono audio problems. And there's just one more thing I'm going to show you guys if I can squeeze this in here. I'm going to change my workspace to the audio workspace. And if I play this, you'll see right here in my audio for track 2, you'll see it moving up and down as audio gets played. Just as a rule of thumb, this is not a hard and fast rule, but as a rule of thumb, you want your audio to do something called, you want it to normalize to between -10 decibels and -20 decibels. What does that mean? What does normalizing mean? Basically, you want your average loudness to be between -10 and -20 decibels. Over here, if you look really carefully, it's kind of small. You're able to see that -10 decibels is here, and -20 decibels is about right here. And let's play this audio to see if it more or less stays between -10 and -20 decibels. You can also see the decibel reading of whatever clip you have selected over here to the right of the timeline. So let's play that real quick. So it looks like it might have peaked a little bit louder than -10 decibels. So what we can do is we can go to the beginning and we can click this little blue button right here and we can drag it just like all those other sliders we were looking at before. And it'll make the entire clip just a little bit more quiet. Let's bring it down by about 1 whole decibel, about, not exactly. And that'll just make the entire thing a little bit quieter. Okay, so that looks like it's about all the time we have for today. I hope that you learned something. I hope you got something out of this. But before I get off or anything, I want to make sure that there's no specific questions that you have that I could potentially answer.
No questions,
Nope.
thank you. But I also was told that that the state or PED is now paying for districts to use this because of the big, push for creative pathways.
Yes, I have heard about that, but I do not know. I don't have a specific answer for you. I would have to check with someone. I could get an answer for you. And if you want to email me, I can email you back if I get an answer to that on maybe the path you would go to getting that access to that.
Thank you, and I appreciate that.
Are you
do you-
talking? I'm sorry, Diego. This
ahead.
is April from Region 9. So, are you referring to the free software that's that you can access from the state for Adobe?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, Kim.King at nmpedus.org, I guess. She's a direct contact for that initiative. And I can try to, I'll send you the link and her contact information of what we used. Will that work?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Can do that. All right.
Awesome.
All right, awesome. Are there any other questions?
Thank you. This was super helpful.
I hope you enjoyed it. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, thank you, Diego. It's really interesting. This program is so powerful.
It really is. It's a really useful program. I mean, it's just I mean, I ran out of time. There's just so much to show in this program, and there's just so much that I wish I could show, but I just tried to cram as much of the most useful stuff into this session, and the morning session. But yeah, I mean, there's just so much that this program can do.
And I think you broke it down nicely because it can be overwhelming. I tried sitting through a recent session that was trying to cram in too much and my brain exploded. This was perfect.
I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear that it was useful.
Actually, I have a real quick question, Diego. How much, I know with these programs, and we could tell that, or at least it seems like you have a pretty big monitor. Is there like a preferred kind of hardware that you would want to get into to do this kind of, like I know with like our students use 13-inch little Dell laptops that have a 720p panel, and doing
Yes.
lots of stuff on there is really hard because there's just so few pixels to work with.
Yeah, I understand. And I mean, I was demonstrating this morning how your monitor other than just the editing process, your monitor can be limiting in really getting a full scope of what your video will look like on lots of different platforms. Because if your monitor is capped at 60 hertz or a 60 hertz refresh rate, you're not going to be able to even see the difference of really high frame rates and stuff like that. So in terms of hardware I would recommend, I mean, the bigger the monitor, the better. You're just going to have more real estate to have a bunch of panels open, stuff like that, potentially even a second monitor. If I know that might not be practical for everyone, but I mean, it's just, it would be nice, right? It would be definitely useful. Basically, I think that anything over a monitor over full HD would be preferred. In terms of hardware, other than a monitor, I mean, if you want like the real like technical side of things, I would recommend a slightly beefier GPU if that's something that you are capable of upgrading or advocating to get a device that has a slightly beefier GPU. My desktop for doing a lot of this software, it has a NVIDIA 3070 graphics card, which handles all this stuff fine. But it's a little bit more powerful of a GPU. It's actually a quite powerful GPU. So just, I would say, get your hands on the best graphics card or device with the most powerful graphics card you can find. Also, if you're teaching students or you're doing this yourself, something that I acquired more recently that has really just helped my workflow, if it's something that's at all practical for you to get, it's a touchscreen external tablet, which can be used as a secondary monitor. I think it's super useful, especially for working with apps like Photoshop and Illustrator and stuff like that. And of course, just with this, I mean, I can have my folders open on my second monitor, my Wacom tablet, and then I can actually have my editing open. Hello? I'm sorry. Did someone say something?
That was me. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay.
Diego, it's
I
April.
just wanted to
I
make
was
sure.
unmuted. I was coughing.
It's okay. You're all good. So yeah, basically summed up, as powerful of a GPU as you can get, a big resolution monitor, a secondary monitor if you can get your hands on it. And honestly, I don't know if I'm necessarily in a position to say this, but I think that touch screens like a Wacom tablet in the classroom would just be incredibly useful. If you're an educator, I don't know if you could work that through administration or anything, but I do think that would be something that would be incredibly valuable in the classroom. You've got these kids, they're growing up on technology. It's one of those things that I would imagine is going to be a useful skill, working with a virtual tablet, a digital tablet. But yeah, that's as best as I can do in terms of recommendations.
Awesome, thank you. I think another thing too that was interesting about the Wacom tablet got me thinking about the new iPad Pros and how that's a really powerful device now. Adobe's starting to get everything to fully run on there since they have desktop class processors and GPUs.
Yes,
Screens on there,
absolutely.
so excellent. So yeah, and the color correctness and all that seems like a really cool kind of next step. You don't get the size, but the screens are just exquisite.
I know a lot of amateur, and I would probably consider them professional level, even if they don't consider it themselves. Designers, video editors, graphics people, basically, that works solely on the iPad Pro. And yeah, it is a really impressive little piece of technology. And Adobe really has been putting in the work to get it to work with the iPad. So yeah, absolutely. I think that is definitely an option. All right. Is any other questions, comments, concerns? I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen there, actually.
Thank you so much, Diego. This was very informative. And I'm
Thank-
glad to hear that they're going to pay for educators to use this, because I pay it on my own and it gets to be rather expensive on a monthly basis. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad you were able to get something out of this. All right.
Thanks, Diego. It was fun.
Thank you for coming. And thank you for all the useful comments. Seriously, you really brought up some things that I probably would have forgot to mention on my own. But yeah, thanks for reminding me. I really do appreciate those comments you made.
For sure. Thanks again.
Thank you for coming.